Poynter Institute, who will discuss the false stories created in the wake of tragic flooding in Central Texas. I'm Celeste Diaz-Sherman.
And I'm Ernie Manous. We'll also discuss how Houston ISD is addressing its teacher vacancies week before the start of the new school year with former Spring Branch ISD superintendent.
And I'm Frank Billingsley. Plus, we'll also discuss scams that occur during times of disaster and how you can avoid falling victim to them.
And as Celeste, Frank, and I discuss the top headlines of the day, we want to know your thoughts, questions, and concerns. Give us a call or text us at 713-440-8870 or email us at talk@hellohouston.org.
Hello Houston is made possible in part by founding sponsors John Bradshaw and Kathy Sanders, and by gifts from listeners like you.
Live from NPR News, I'm Lakshmi Singh. Flags are flying at half-staff across Texas today on Governor Greg Abbott's orders to honor the victims of the 4th of July weekend floods. The death toll statewide has climbed to 110, the vast majority of the losses in Kerr County. Governor Abbott says more than 160 individuals are still unaccounted for. NPR's Frank Morris reports search parties say their grim work is far from over.
The Guadalupe River buried some of its victims in huge, dense jumbles of logs and steel debris. That's why they're hard to find. On a well-searched section of river near Ingram, Texas, volunteers with the group Texas EquiSearch think they found another body. Mark Edwards, the group's field operation manager, points to heavy equipment, carefully disassembling a tangled mess.
And so we begin to remove that tree pile. And some of those tree piles were 30 and 40 foot tall, wrapped in RVs and cars up against the trees.
Edwards says there are miles and miles of scenes like this along the Guadalupe River. He thinks finding all the bodies will take weeks. Frank Morris, NPR News, Kerrville, Texas.
A U.S. Supreme Court ruling's clearing the way for the Trump administration to lay off hundreds of thousands of federal workers. NPR's Andrea Hsu reports on the impact on agencies.
This affects close to 20 agencies, including very large ones like the Department of Health and Human Services, the Department of Agriculture, the Treasury Department, and many others. And in some cases, like at Health and Human Services, some 10,000 employees had already been issued layoff notices, and the reason most of them are still on the payroll is because of that lower court order that's now gone, for now anyway. We don't know how soon people might be formally separated.
NPR's Andrea Hsu reporting. A day after meeting with President Trump about Gaza ceasefire talks, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was expected to meet today with Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth at the Pentagon. The administration has expressed optimism of an agreement this week that leads to a truce between Israel and Hamas and the release of living and deceased hostages. In Turkey, an imprisoned Kurdish leader has been heard from for the first time in decades, calling on the militant group he founded to disarm. Here's NPR's Jana Raff.
Abdullah Öcalan founded the Kurdistan Workers' Party, the PKK, and he's been imprisoned since 1999. Öcalan is revered by many Kurds, but Turkey and the U.S. consider the PKK terrorists, and the public hasn't heard his voice in more than 20 years. On Wednesday, the Turkish government allowed the release of a video address by Öcalan.
That's NPR's Jana Raff reporting. U.S. stocks are trading higher this hour, with the Dow up 88 points at 44,329. The S&P's risen 19 points and the Nasdaq is up 115 points. You're listening to NPR News.
Live from News 88.7 in Houston, I'm Matt Harrop. At least 119 people have now been confirmed dead in the Hill Country. That's according to officials on the ground. It's an increase of 10 deaths from the last update after flooding over the 4th of July weekend. More than 173 people are still missing as of right now, but that official number is still unknown. At least 30 children are among the dead. Texas Public Radio's Maria Navarro reports on search and recovery efforts.
Identifications are still pending for 19 adults and 7 children. Among those missing are 5 campers and 1 counselor from the Christian summer camp, Camp Mystic. Kerrville Mayor Joe Herring Jr. said at a press conference Tuesday that the community has seen an outpouring of support.
Over and over, I've asked you to pray. It occurred to me that I haven't asked you for what to pray specifically. Please pray for those who mourn, for those who wait, and for those who help.
Kerrville officials say the last live rescue took place last Friday. The total number of missing remains unknown. I'm Mariana Navarro in San Antonio.
In less than 2 weeks, Texas lawmakers will meet in Austin for a special legislative session. And now Governor Greg Abbott says the top agenda item will be helping communities affected by the historic flooding in the Hill Country. Here's House Speaker Dustin Burrows.
The members of the House, and I know the Senate, are very interested in finding solutions, to not accept that we can't do better. But we will have those hearings. We will synthesize what we get, and we will come up with legislation that I believe will make it to the governor's desk and make us a stronger, better, more resilient Texas.
And we will continue to keep you updated on the latest right here on News 88.7. Sports yesterday, the Astros lost to the Cleveland Guardians 10-6. It was a 10-inning game that the Astros lost yesterday, and they will look to avoid getting swept later on tonight. That game is in Houston. Currently 84 degrees here on the UH campus, 90 for the high later today. A 60% chance of showers this afternoon. I'm Matt Harrop, News 88.7.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Progressive Insurance, home of the Name Your Price tool, so drivers can see coverage options at Progressive.com or 1-800-PROGRESSIVE. Price and coverage match limited by state law. And the listeners who support this NPR station.
Live from the University of Houston, it's Hello Houston, an open forum on today's biggest stories affecting Houston and beyond. Call now, 713-440-8870, or let us know your thoughts on today's topics by emailing us at talk@hellohouston.org. Now here's your host for Hello Houston, Ernie Manous, Celeste Diaz-Sherman, and Frank Billingsley.
It is Hello Houston, and our news of the day is the threesome is back.
We're back.
That's right.
Frank, Celeste, and Ernie, we are all finally back in-house after vacations and sicknesses and trips and a lot to cover. But we want you to know that we understand the storms that were happening. We miss not having Frank with us. In a little bit, at the top of the next hour, Frank is going to give us his analysis of what could have made a difference in all this. And it may surprise you what
we'll
you've
talk
come
about
up with.
that. I mean, it's so personal to meteorologists. Our whole mission is to keep people safe during severe weather. And that's what we live to do.
Right.
And this unfolded tragically, as we know. Personal shout out to friends in Galveston, the McCrory McLeod family lost their daughter and granddaughter. I know that family. And I think all of us are 1 or 2 degrees from somebody we either know that knows somebody. It's just so close to
I think that's
home.
Something we've looked at and we've talked about over and over about how even though this was happening specifically in that Kerr County, Kerrville area, we had so many from all over Texas visiting out on the holiday, out on the Guadalupe River. It's one of our most beautiful parts of the state. Yeah. And so, again, we all are feeling this.
We'll dig a lot deeper into all of that at the top of our next hour. But also, if you have questions for Frank about the weather, the forecasting of it, our understanding of it, what happened there, Frank is here to take your calls like you are every single. I feel like you're a guest today because you're such an authority on this stuff, Frank. But
well, I'm not a perfect hill country weatherman, but I know a lot about storms and I know a lot about Texas, so I'll do my best.
713-440-8870. You can email those questions. Also, talk@hellohouston.org, or if you're watching us on YouTube on the Houston Public Media channel, you can leave comments there. We'll be monitoring those too, and we'll get into all those questions. But as we said, let's get into the headlines.
That's right. During the 4th of July flooding, many of us continued throughout the weekend to hold out hope for news of survivors. I know I personally regularly checked my phone, hoping to see those words found. Yeah. On Sunday, July 6th, a Facebook Live feed from an on-the-ground volunteer reported 2 girls rescued 27 feet up in a tree near Comfort, Texas. And that quickly spread. First on Facebook, then local and national outlets started to also report this news. But by Monday, we would all know the story was not true. And joining us now to discuss how misinformation spreads and what we can do about it is Kelly McBride, the Senior Vice President and Chair of Craig Newmark Center for Ethics and Leadership of the Poynter Institute. Kelly, thanks so much for joining us today on Hello Houston.
Thanks for having me.
If you have questions, comments, thoughts you want to share with Kelly, give us a call, 713-440-8870. Kelly, I guess where I would start with all of this is the way this particular story started. To pretty much most consumers of social media out there, it would seem as though this was factual.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of information on social media that seems like it's factual. And most of it is inconsequential, right? Because when it turns out not to be factual or to be an exaggeration or to be a conglomeration of stories, not a single story, there's no actual harm done to us. But in this case, there was harm done. And that's why we're paying attention to it. Every day, if you are on social media, you are exposed to information that is not true. This particular one hurts because we all wanted it to be true so bad.
And it's also layered, Kelly, I feel like it started on social media. And then for people that would say, oh my gosh, might be a little skeptical, they went to a local news outlet. And so help us understand how professional journalists verify their sources so we kind of have a better idea of that as well.
Sure, and especially in a scenario like this, right? And I have supervised journalists who have gone out and covered disasters, and I have been on the ground reporter covering disasters many, many times. And those journalists are trained to every single person that they interview to get their name and to ask them for the spelling of their name. And when you ask somebody, how do you spell your name? That sort of puts you on notice as a source that like, oh, my name may show up in their report. My name may be attached to this piece of information. And so that ends up being a accountability measure. The other thing that you do is you ask them for a phone number or some way that you could get a hold of them in case you want to contact them again. And that's really important in disasters because like this one, there's going to be a lot of recreation of who knew what when, and people are going to be trying to draw maps and timestamp things. And so many journalists are going to want to get back in touch with the people that they talked to because they're going to want more information in order to build out that recreation.
Hi, it's Frank Billingsley. Thanks so much for being here. So I would add to that, see if you agree, where's the picture? Because this reporter had some self-described eyewitnesses to this. You can get their name from these eyewitnesses and their phone number, as you say. But how does someone, if you're talking to several supposed eyewitnesses to this event, how does someone not have a cell phone picture of what went down, if not a video?
Exactly. And the other thing that a reporter will do is they'll take a picture of every individual.
Sure.
And that just helps you because when you get back and you're trying to sort through all your notes, it just helps you to have that visual and that timestamp. A lot of times you take a picture of the person and then a picture of their name in your notebook so you can remember who they are. But yeah, you're asking them for any documentation that they have, text messages that they might have shared with people, images, photos, or videos that they took. And so, yeah, the fact that that there was no image of this, also the fact that when you read that story that was in a newspaper or a news not a newspaper, a news outlet. When you read that story, there are a couple things about it that I noticed right away. And one is there was not one named source, not even a named agency. And so that is, as a news consumer, that tells me that, oh, maybe they don't have this nailed down. The second thing is there were no other mainstream news organizations reporting it, even after like an hour or two. And what I know about news is for a story that good, the Associated Press, all the television stations, they're going to nail it down. And I've talked to some people from the Public Media Network in San Antonio, and they said they really wanted it to be true. They actually had built out a shell of a story so that they could publish it and report it. But when they couldn't find a source to verify it, then they knew that there was a problem with the story, and so they never published it.
And I'm guilty of it. I watched the Facebook Live. I had a friend who reposted it. As I was watching it Sunday, I sent it to our director of content, one of our directors here of talk shows, and I said, Jack, we got to have this guy on. Oh my gosh. And then slowly Jack and I started going, looking at this and being like, okay, well, let's wait. Let's give it some time before we are going to do that.
And I
verification.
think that's part of the issue here that we're talking about is that individuals do react to these things. We see something, we hear a story, we share a story, we want to. Journalists are supposed to be trained to go that step further, that they are going to verify it. It's perfectly understandable that a friend of yours saw this story and passes it along on Facebook. It's in a moment. So much was happening so quickly. So many people were looking for stories and reporting things and sharing things. But we have to hold our journalists to a higher standard, especially in today's day and age.
Which, Kelly, question for you, do really quickly, and I want you to comment on that. But I also, to Ernie's point, is that just the day and age we're in, social media?
Well, every single piece of information that you see on social media is designed to manipulate you. And manipulate you by making you feel something. It might make you feel angry. It might make you feel happy. It might make you feel like you want to buy something because you really need it, right? But that is how social media is designed to manipulate you. And so as a news consumer, as somebody who's trying to get information so that you can be informed and live your life better and have actual real facts, it's really important to become aware of that manipulation, what that emotional twist is that you're feeling, and then to look at the facts behind it. Because if you can start to recognize that, like, oh, the whole reason that many of these posts exist is just to get some sort of rise out of me, that's how the algorithms work, that's how the platforms work, and that's how many of the people who make money on social media make their money, then you can become a little bit more savvy about finding the good information, the information that's really valuable because it's true, and not because somebody has distorted it or twisted it in order to further their own causes.
Do we know, let me just ask this really quickly, do we know the initial motivation of the first telling of this story? Was it just someone with misinformation, or was it someone trying to gather attention?
Clickbait.
Yeah.
So we at Poynter have had a couple of people researching this, and we can find two initial versions of the story, and we can't tell which one came first. But we believe that there was a very disreputable news, not a news site, a website that traffics in fake information. It's actually not even located in this country. It's located in a different country. So we believe that was the first origin of it. And then what we think happened was a lot of people saw that and started believing that they either had it firsthand because they were part of the search and rescue operation, or they heard people talking about it who had seen it. And it just became a game of telephone after that until the second news organization, which was the local news organization that published it, ended up publishing it. But go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. No, go ahead, please.
Well, I was just going to say, we have a lot of people at Poynter that spend a lot of time studying disinformation and tracking down disinformation. And in any natural disaster, there is more and more disinformation. And it's usually started by these websites that are just trying to get traffic, right? They don't even mean to be malicious. They just know that they can that they can make money by getting eyeballs, right? Every time there's a hurricane, there's sharks in the street, or if there's flooding in New York, there's sharks in the subway, right? It's always these outside rampant spreaders of disinformation who start these posts, but then well-meaning people share them with their friends and family, and that's how they gain traction.
You are listening to Hello Houston. We are speaking with Kelly McBride from the Poynter Institute. You can join the Join the conversation with questions at 713-440-8870.
So, Shelley, I was going to say, when I did my share of street reporting and you found something like this going on, you went to an authority for confirmation. You found a sheriff or a government official or somebody that was more than a self-described eyewitness. I don't think that was in this story, but to a broader point, how do you know as a reporter or reading a story if even that authority figure is learning true information? Because even they are getting bad stuff these days and putting it out there.
Yeah, I mean, one is you ask them how they know what they know. Did you see it? Do you have firsthand evidence of it? There have been other notorious bad information stories that came from officials who were reporting it secondhand, and the reporter didn't ask that question. And so, yeah, as a journalist, you ask them, you know, do you know about the girls in the tree? How do you know about the girls in the tree? Did you see it? Did you see any evidence of it? Can you name one person who saw it? Right? And you press them on how they know what they know. I was a former police reporter, and law enforcement actually, because of the nature of their jobs, on the first pass, they actually do get a decent amount of information wrong. Sometimes it's because of the heat of the moment. Sometimes it's because of the perspective that they're bringing. But I learned, even when I was looking at police reports, that I had to verify every single piece of information because just because it's written down doesn't mean that it's actually true.
Right. You know, one thing that I'm sure some that are listening are curious about. So the story that they reported wasn't correct. Address the harm that comes from a situation like this, where a story like this gains traction, for folks that are like, it was wrong. It's so much more than that.
Yeah. I mean, for one, you have the parents of 27 children who are dead. And, you know, some of those parents, those children have not been recovered. And so the hope that it created in those parents is particularly cruel and devastating. But the second thing, the broader damage that it does, is to our ability as a community to trust reliable information providers. Because when you believe something and then find out that it's not true, you actually are less likely to trust information that is true. And we all know about news fatigue. We all know how weary we become trying to sort through what's actually happening, what might happen, and what didn't happen, but somebody is trying to make us believe did happen. We're all trying to sort through complicated information these days. And there are a lot of officials and people with power who are confusing things. So as a news consumer, we have a really hard job already. And then when something like this happens, it just really further erodes the foundations of believing anything. And the problem, if we get to a position in our country, in our communities, where we don't believe anything, where we can't trust any information, then democracy can't actually function, right? We can't even function as communities, as neighborhoods, or as groups of people. And so, you know, that sounds alarmist, but every time something like this happens, we're one step closer to that becoming a reality.
Well, we've all heard, if we can't trust our elections, then we're doomed.
Our number here, 713.
And people don't trust, right? People, because so many people have questioned our election process, even though our election process in this country is one of the most secure and solid processes in the world. If people don't trust it, then it doesn't matter how secure it is, because
that's where it starts.
Because they don't believe the truth. Yeah.
713-440-8870. We're talking about the dissemination of false information, especially during a time of tragedy. On the line right now, Sam from Sugarland has a question. Sam, what's on your mind?
Yeah, hello, sir. I'm trying to say that, you know, right now the news outlets and papers are competing for furious pace of reporting. As soon as something happens, they want to report it immediately. And it is very clear that they're not allowing the news and the events to percolate.
Sam, thank you for that. It seems as though, to rephrase what Sam is talking about, is the speed to get your story out first has harmed the accuracy and the validity of reporting. Is that accurate to say?
In some cases, yes. Although, I can name a dozen newsrooms that did not report that story because they couldn't verify it, even though they really wanted to be first. So most professional newsrooms have a process for verifying information and a system for making sure that nothing slips through. And so he's not wrong that journalists are all competing to be first, and that being first has a business advantage, and that sometimes information is reported that is incomplete. But in this case, many newsrooms did not bite on this particular one.
And I do want to clarify. I know earlier I was like, I sent this to. We did not report on this story.
Oh, right.
Number one, and I, as somebody who has worked in commercial news, in a commercial newsroom, as well as a public media newsroom, that's something that I learned right here on public media is that we pause.
Well, our philosophy in news was always get it first, but get it right. Mm-hmm. And you can't forget the get it right part. And I think I know what you're talking about is in terms of scanner traffic, that assignment editors will hear scanner traffic, but before jumping on it, they'll verify it as true before you start sending someone to cover scanner traffic.
Yeah.
Am
I right on that?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, reporting stuff off the scanner is
but it's been done. It's been done, and I've known people that have been fired because they got it wrong that way. Mm-hmm. So they thought, well, I heard it on the scanner. I mean, that was sort of pre-social media. I'm talking like 90s and early 2000s. But I heard it on the scanner, so it must be true. And now you see it on social media, so it must be true. And now as we got one comment, and now other Congress people are putting it out there as true, and you can't even believe your own Congress people because they're not verifying the information.
Kelly, before we let you...
And they have political motivations, right? They have political motivations to get in front of an audience and to get their own spin on information. Politicians are part of the problem these days.
Kelly, before we let you go, oftentimes when I would see a story online, I would go to like Snopes.com to verify whether it's true or not. Where should people go when they're hearing these stories? Where are some of the best sources to have fact-checking happening in real time?
Well, I mean, PolitiFact, which is associated with the Poynter Institute, is one of my favorite places. And for many of these widely spread pieces of misinformation, PolitiFact will have done a fact check on it. I think the other thing that you can do as a news consumer is try and triangulate your sources, right? So if you see something and it's reported from newsroom X, what are 3 other regular sources that you get information from? It can be CNN, it can be the Wall Street Journal, it can be the New York Times, it can be the BBC, but what are other places that you get information? And go look on their websites and see if they're reporting it. Because if you can see different independent newsrooms reporting the same thing, that's usually a pretty good indication that they have independently verified it.
Hopefully.
Kelly McBride is the Senior Vice President and Chair of Craig Newmark Center for Ethics and Leadership of the Poynter Institute. Kelly, thanks so much for joining us today on Hello Houston.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Coming up on Hello Houston, the University of Houston's Dr. Duncan Klussmann on HISD's teaching vacancies. This is News 88.7.
I'm Asma Khalid. Elon Musk has been relocating his businesses to Texas in recent years.
Elon Musk already has Tesla and the Boring Company headquartered right here in Central Texas. Now he plans to move the X headquarters too.
He's also having a big impact on the legislature. We hear exclusive ProPublica reporting on that next time on Here and Now.
You can hear it this afternoon. It's on at 1 o'clock. It's more important than ever to stay informed. That's why Houston Public Media delivers well-researched news that's free for everyone.
And right now, your support helps make sure it stays that way. No subscription, no paywall, just news that's here when you need it.
Give today to keep yourself and your community informed, no matter what the future holds.
Make your donation now at houstonpublicmedia.org/donate.
Or call 888-909-0887.
Tonight on Houston Public Media TV 8. At 7, an encore episode of Walking with Dinosaurs. Then at 8, the second season of Human Footprint explores how the things we do reveal who we are. Tonight on TV 8, or stream on the PBS app.
Support comes from Children's Museum of Houston, presenting Faithful Friends, an exhibit fostering connection, curiosity, understanding, and friendship. Families explore other cultures through the eyes of Houston kids. More at cmhouston.org.
Support for Houston Public Media comes from Gulf Coast Blood. The need for blood is constant. Giving on an ongoing basis helps ensure blood is always available for patients in local hospitals. Info on locations to donate blood is at giveblood.org.
Support comes from John Moore, helping with plumbing, electrical, and air conditioning repairs, including out-of-warranty units since 1965. Details at 730-2525 or at johnmooreservices.com.
And now back to Hello Houston. To comment on any of today's topics, call 713-440-8870 or email us at talk@hellohouston.org. And now here's Ernie Manous, Celestia Sherman, and Frank Billingsley.
Now we turn our focus to Houston ISD, where hundreds of teacher vacancies remain just weeks before the start of the new school year. That includes openings within the new education system, or NES, the district's state-appointed reform model. With so many positions to fill, what will it take to hire and retain that many educators? What challenges lie ahead for the district navigating sweeping changes and staff shortages and community concerns? Joining us now is Dr. Duncan Klussmann, who is a clinical associate professor in the Department of Educational Leadership and Policy Studies at the University of Houston. He also served as superintendent of schools in Spring Branch ISD for over a decade. Dr. Klussmann, welcome to Hello Houston.
Great to be with you all.
If you have questions about this topic and for our guests, give us a call, 713-440-8870. I guess my first question would be, with facing more than 350 teacher vacancies heading into the school year, what does this signal to you about the health of the district's staffing pipeline?
Well, I don't think it's necessarily uncommon for a system this large to be at that stage right now. In Texas, teacher contracts, teachers have until a date in the summer to resign, and sometimes you get these late resignations that spike your number of vacancies. So it's not necessarily uncommon. Particularly, it's not uncommon in the current situation of teacher shortages across the nation coming out of the pandemic. But clearly, you want to be able to close that gap. I mean, your goal of any school system is to be fully staffed with certified teachers on day one. And that's becoming harder and harder to do for school systems.
In general, is the idea of becoming a teacher, and this seems almost obvious, but a less desirable choice that people are making today?
I think we're in a real transition. I think there's been a move over the last 10 or 15 years not to trust our teachers as much. I'm a big believer that the people closest to the action know what's best to do, but we've kind of moved away from that. I think that's one factor. The pandemic was another factor. A lot of people kind of reassessing what they're doing in all fields of life and employment. And then I think also the virtual side. So you have, particularly if you think about new teachers coming into the business, they're often younger and their friends are maybe able to work remotely, either full-time or part-time. You can't really do that in teaching. And we've learned during the pandemic that the school systems that got their kids back in the classroom fastest, their kids did the best. So we know that this needs to be in the classroom, face-to-face interaction with the teacher. And so you have this struggle, I think, for some individuals going, I want to be doing what my friends are doing. I want to be remote. I was in a coffee shop yesterday. There was a row of tables in this coffee shop. Everyone in that coffee shop in the row of tables were probably 35 or younger, all on Zoom, conducting their business and having that flexibility to do that. Probably working across the country or across the world, but in one location and in an area that's great to be in the summertime. And that flexibility is not there at all for teachers.
So, Dr. Klussmann, we've seen a couple of big passages of legislation in this last session. So you were superintendent of Spring Branch ISD. So go back to your superintendent days, and you get the order that every classroom has to have the 10 Commandments on the wall. And all of the gender identity groups, gay, straight alliances, or whatever, Iranian American kids or ambassadors abroad, whatever that group, they're no longer going to be in the schools. As a superintendent, how do you handle that?
It's very difficult today. So I was very fortunate during my time of teaching, being a campus administrator and a superintendent. The Supreme Court over the 70s, 80s, and 90s established kind of clear decisions on many issues, particularly around religion and discipline and student expression. But it made it really clear if you followed that guidance, you were going to be okay. That has completely changed in the last 10 years. The Supreme Court is making different decisions that put into question those practices for many years. You're seeing legislation come along, the ones, Frank, that you mentioned. That makes it very difficult in understanding how to make the decision. And to be honest with you, a lot of the political things that happen in Austin are just kind of noise to teachers. They just get in the way of them focusing on their students and focusing on their content. And really staying focused on that. And one thing I'd encourage people to do is stay focused on that. But it has become very difficult because you try to analyze the situation, make the best decision you can, give the best guidance. But because we're not getting clear guidance from the Supreme Court necessarily, they're changing a lot of things that have been decided in the past, or is clear guidance or more noise being added by the legislature and passing laws at the state level, it makes the job very difficult for superintendents, for campus leaders, and for teachers.
Keeping your superintendent hat on for one more minute here, as we talk about the less candidates out there, less people becoming teachers, wanting to become teachers, as a superintendent, what should be the focus as far as retention or staff development, or what do you do then to retain the workforce you have? Looking at this deficit of teachers, is it more the fact that they are leaving on their own volition, or are we just trying to reinvigorate the teaching team we have and bring in better teachers?
So you have a couple of things that are happening there. You have younger teachers who are going to come in like any other profession. Some are going to enjoy it, some are not. So you're going to have this turnover in year 3 through 7 that really people get concerned of the level of turnover in schools, but it really kind of mirrors, if you look at the research, it mirrors the world outside of education. And so you're going to have that. Then you're going to, how do you retain teachers who have been in the profession for 15, 20, 25 years, or people who are getting to retirement age and wanting to keep them in beyond their retirement age? Most of the studies out there have said that the number one factor is not necessarily salary. Salary is important, and it's in the top 3 all the times in surveys. But one of the biggest factors is the organization I'm working for, are they invested in me and making me better at what I do? Are they providing me the opportunities, the professional development to make me better? And I think that's really important. Again, I think there's a huge shift, by the way, happening, and it's happening at an accelerated level in HISD, away from the way we approach teaching in the past. And I think that's having some effect on how individuals are deciding whether to enter or not, or whether to stay in it. And if we want to talk about that, I can talk more about those particulars, but just the approach to teaching is changing, and I think that's having an effect.
But, we're talking about retention, and you talk about the natural incoming of new teachers, like any industry, when you have first timers coming in right out of college. But I've got to tell you, as a parent of an HISD student, right now, with the amount of teacher openings, you're saying that seems about right. That is about right on track. But can HISD recruit experienced teachers with a success track, with a successful record. And how are they going to do that given a lot of the just the controversy around it, with a superintendent that seems to be pretty polarizing? Is that still possible for HISD to do?
So you make a very good point, Celeste, and you put a couple of caveats in there, and that is someone who already has a track record, who has some level of success. That's very hard to do at this point. You're most likely hiring at this point teachers new to the profession.
Okay.
But again, that has been a practice for many years. But at this point of the hiring cycle, you're typically hiring people new to the profession. You're hiring alternative certified teachers, by the way, which make up 50% or more of teachers today, new teachers to the profession. Or the trend has been since the pandemic, you're hiring uncertified teachers. Now, the legislature just passed some legislation to try to stop that practice. It was allowed during the pandemic. It's continued. There's a significant number of people being hired who are completely uncertified. So they're not, they are degreed, but they have not been through a traditional program. They're not even necessarily in an alternative program. And so that has been a factor since the pandemic that's been very different. And so one thing we're always concerned about in educational leadership, if you're leading a system or if you're a campus principal, you know that your best hiring occurs in April, May, and into June. And when you get into July, you're going to be in getting individuals typically who do not have what you describe, the track record or the track record of success. They're going to be new to the profession. My point I was making is just as far as the number of teachers in the system, I know that 300 sounds high to us, but there are many systems out there that have a significant number of vacancies right now going into the first day of school, and are trying to close that vacancy. So 300 in the number of teachers in HISD would be equivalent to smaller districts maybe having 60 positions.
Mm-hmm. So should parents be concerned?
Well, I think all of us should be concerned when we're not creating the profession to attract people into it. There's been these studies that have shown in other developed countries that they're getting their top performing students go into teaching. And I can tell you, just traveling different places in the world, there is a level of respect for educators that are different in other countries than is in the U.S. today. And so I think that affects us. So I think we should be concerned there in that sense. I mean, I think what we want is a highly qualified, well-trained teacher in every classroom. I think that's the goal of individuals. I think we're still dealing with the result of coming out of the pandemic. But I also think that the policies being made at the state level and at the national level is not solving this issue. The state had a task force. I think they've called now to do another task force. They already have recommendations from one task force. And I think, there's just hasn't been that real commitment to do the things we need to attract the best talent and keep people in the field. There is a significant pay raise coming along from this session, and that's good. However, I think a lot of that motivation is more political motivation than it is a long-term plan to get more people in. HISD does something actually very interesting in the NES schools and the new education system schools. The certified teacher gets paid a significant amount. I mean, they have taken dollars and people and restructured them. And so I think, I always thought the problem in our business was everyone focuses on first year salaries, first year zero experience salaries. That's what everyone published. Oh, we're at 63, we're at 65. But then you get in the business in 30 years, you don't move anywhere, and I think there is an effort to try to make sure that we're moving. There are programs now in Texas called the Texas Incentive Allotment, getting individuals to six figures in their salary. But we really need to focus more on that. We tend to focus in systems around the beginning teacher pay and not what is happening to people who've been in the business 20, 25, 30 years.
Dr. Klussmann, we'll have to have you on as we get closer to the school year in August to talk more about this and look at those number of vacancies have slimmed and get your thoughts on that.
It's great to see everyone.
Thank you. Thank you for being here.
Dr. Duncan Klussmann is a clinical associate professor in the Department of Educational, Leadership, and Policy Studies at the University of Houston. Thanks for joining us. Coming up, stay with us. We will be talking about fraud and fundraising and how to feel confident when you are prepared to give during trying times. Stay with us as News 88.7 continues.
Houston Public Media provides a free, essential, and trusted public service to everyone in Southeast Texas. The generosity of our Affinity Council Committee enables us to bring inspiration, insight, and connection through public media. Kathleen and Gregory Bethke, Daryl and John Dunn, the Hillcrest Foundation, Janet and Amin Nishrat, Smita Singh, and Sue Jean White and Robert Connor. Thank you.
I'm Josh Adams, the new general manager of Houston Public Media, and we are here for one reason, you. I'm thrilled to lead this remarkable team dedicated to our mission of informing, educating, and inspiring everyone in the greater Houston area. And yes, these are challenging times, but together we'll meet them head on with bold ideas, honest reporting, and stories that matter. Houston Public Media is your public media. Together, let's make it incredible.
The recent war between Israel and Iran raised questions about Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Khamenei. The 86-year-old was a potential Israeli target during the conflict, and now people are speculating about who or what will replace him when he dies.
It is quite possible that Ayatollah Khamenei was the last supreme leader of Iran.
I'm Mary Louise Kelly. That story on the next All Things Considered from NPR News.
You can hear it this afternoon starting at 3 o'clock.
Support comes from GenPro, a Houston-based home generator service providing power to homes during unexpected outages, helping with connectivity and productivity. More information is available at genpro.com.
Support comes from the Eternal Gandhi Museum Houston, highlighting the power of nonviolent conflict resolution through examples of peace leaders worldwide. Now open. Field trips and group visits available. More at egmh.org.
And now back to Hello Houston. To comment on any of today's topics, call 713-440-8870 or email us at talk@hellohouston.org. Now back to Ernie Manous, Celeste Diaz-Sherman, and Frank Billingsley.
After major natural disasters, people want to help in any way possible. I am sure many people have seen the GoFundMe pages or all the links being shared on social media to random fundraisers. In the aftermath of the 4th of July flooding in Central Texas, the level of need was immense, and so is the willingness to support. This is a perfect opportunity for scammers to take advantage of Good Samaritans looking for ways to help in times of crisis. Joining us to discuss how we can protect ourselves from falling for an online fake fundraiser is Amanda Orr, the founder of the Orr Strategy Group, a legal communications firm that specializes in crisis management and public messaging. Amanda, welcome to Hello Houston.
Thank you.
So you obviously work predominantly in the legal space, and you felt compelled to post about something on your social media platform because we're already seeing some of the worst case scenarios. Mm-hmm. Can you tell us more about some of the things that you are seeing of fraudulent and scammers coming up?
Yeah, so tragedy often brings out the best in people as well as the worst. And right. Texas especially, we give big and we give fast. And scammers are counting on that. They're counting on us to give very quickly and with our hearts and not to really examine things closely. And so what we've been seeing with the girls that died at Camp Mystic in particular, because their photos were shared around by their parents with their phone numbers, hoping to get information about them when they were missing, we have had scammers that have created fundraisers using those children's photos and saying that they are related to the children and that they are raising money for the families, when in fact they have no relation to the families. The families have no idea. And I'm sure you can imagine the parents are in immense distress. They will never be the same, only to find out that their child's likeness and image is being used to line somebody else's pockets fraudulently.
Amanda, I've never done a fundraiser like this, but I see them all the time.
Yeah.
Is there any verification? I mean, what's the process? Can anyone that wants to just slap a picture up and say, "Send me money"?
Yeah. So I think that a lot of us have had experience where there has been sort of a grassroots movement to raise money or to mobilize volunteers. And there are very well-meaning people that do that. My personal rule of thumb with those sorts of fundraisers and organized volunteer opportunities is to never have more than one degree of separation between the organizer, meaning if I want to give something, I need to know somebody that knows the organizer personally. So those are very valid ways to give as long as you don't have more than one degree of separation. But as far as verifying some of these other fundraisers, I have a little acrostic that I came up with to help, and it's GIVE. And the G stands for ground yourself. And like I said, scammers are counting on us to give fast. And so what we need to do is take a step back and take a deep breath and really start to examine what's going on behind the organization. I is for investigate the organizer. So y'all are all journalists. So we need to think like good journalists, even as philanthropic organizations. So we're going to think about the 5 W's: who, what, when, where, why, and how. What is going on behind this organization or this person? And then the V is verify their history. There's 3 ways you can verify an organization's history. One is you can go to the IRS. You can look up an EIN number. If they're a valid nonprofit, they're going to be on irs.gov. Or you can look at charitynavigator.com and look for their history on there. If you choose to go through GoFundMe, GoFundMe also has a verified fundraiser page. So those are 3 easy ways you can verify. But there are other ways that you can verify as well. You can look at their social media handles, make sure that there's a long history, maybe some news articles about them out there. And then the E is examine donation links closely. And that's where people are really starting to get sneaky. For instance, there could be a Venmo or a Cash App account that's official. And this is an example. It's not a real example, but it could be at Camp Mystic. Well, a scammer could do at Camp Mystic 1. And they could use the child's photo, or they could use the organizer's name. They're literally copying what the official organizations are putting out there and then changing a letter or putting a number or a period and collecting money by using a duplicate page.
It's like American Red Cross. I used to always just give money to the American Red Cross because I mean, they're out there right now.
Yes.
And we know the American Red Cross, and they're going to help. But even that can get a scam, right? I mean, they can AmericanRedCross.TV or something.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, that happens. These people are clever. And it's unfortunate, but this is how they make their money, is by thinking of any and every way they can capitalize off of tragedies like this.
And so you got to look at that URL. You can't just look at the name for sure.
That's right.
We have this person, imaginary person, Betty. She's very moved by what's going on, and she wants to rally people to give money to give to this source. So she goes to GoFundMe or any of these sources online to create an account to raise money because her heart is in the right place. How do you know that Betty is legit and it's not Bobby, who is actually out there to pocket the money themselves? And do these organizations have certain ways that they vet who can post on their sites?
Right. So again, 1 degree of separation is the most you want from an individual that is organizing a fundraiser. So that's the first way.
But I hear you say that, and I understand what you're saying, but I live in Nebraska, and I have been watching this on the news, and I am so moved. I don't know anyone connected with it, but I do want to help these families. So I look to these accounts, and I see my fictional Betty there, so I give to Betty. What would you recommend to these people, Nebraska, anywhere, that aren't connected to it, but they feel a heart connection?
Yeah, so I would recommend not contributing to those sorts of individual fundraisers. What I would suggest contributing to There's two organizations that are boots on the ground, and they accept donations. As you all know, with Hurricane Harvey and the hurricanes that we have over here, we have organizations like Cajun Navy that organize people that actually go do the cleanup. The two organizations that I feel passionately about and are fully vetted by me as well as a lot of other people, one is Crowdsource Rescue. The second is TEXSAR, TEXSAR. And both organizations train volunteers. You have to apply to be a volunteer. These are often first responders or former first responders or veterans or communities, people with chainsaws, people with big trucks, people with cadaver dogs that organize. These are grassroots organizations, but they do need money. They do need volunteers.
But what if I want the money to go into a family that had a loss as opposed to a recovery or a search group, but I really want to make an impact for a particular family?
Yeah, so that's hard. I mean, that is definitely something where I would recommend finding somebody that actually knows a family to make sure that they are actually getting the money. The other organizations I would contribute to, and I think they're often overlooked, are volunteer fire departments, because the Kerr County Fire Department is working really, really hard around the clock. This work is not going to end for a very long time. They see a lot. They go through PTSD. And so a lot of these volunteer firefighter organizations are giving them relief. They're stepping in when they need their own breaks. Volunteer firefighters are funded by their own money quite often. And so when we're talking about how to really impact these families directly and you don't know how to, help the first responders, because they're the ones that are actually touching these families.
Right. And we're also assuming that some of these families want this type of monetary support when they might be saying, no, thank you. You know, we're trying to just figure things out. This is an added layer that I don't necessarily want to be managing. Yeah. And so, I think this has been so interesting in how everybody has really wanted to rally around these families, yet they also want their privacy.
Yeah, there's a lot of good church groups, too. So give me some hope here. Do these scammers ever get brought into trial, or is it all out of the United States scammers that they get the money and they run?
Gone. No, these are quite often Americans. And what's great about that is we can find them. I have a lot of attorneys that I work with, and yesterday I had a couple that spent all day writing cease and desist letters, and these people have 48 hours to send them a full accounting. Otherwise, they're about to get into a lot of criminal trouble as well as civil trouble.
So what is the legality around it, about starting a false, and how do you verify it is false per se?
You have to have the records and a full accounting of what you're taking in and where the money is going to. And if a family requests that you stop using their child's picture to raise money for whatever the money is going to go to, they need to stop.
It's one of those things where we continue to see this, and I would imagine that there are going to be more fraudulent type scams. Is there any way, if somebody sees something and they say, this looks really off to me, this looks like a scam, how can they report it?
Yeah, so you can contact an attorney, and the attorney that I know that is doing cease and desist letters on behalf of the family is named Kyle Herbert Trial Law. He is doing that free of charge, looking over the organizations that look fraudulent and then figuring out if he needs to be sending cease and desist letters.
Is there a vetting website where you can look that says these are legit, these are not, kind of like a...
Not a single place, but Charity Navigator or IRS or a GoFundMe verified fundraiser page would be the ones that I would think.
Nice. Good advice. Thank you.
Excellent. Amanda Orr is the founder of the Orr Strategy Group, a legal communications firm that specializes in crisis management and public messaging. Amanda, thank you for joining us today on Hello Houston.
Thank you.
Coming up on Hello Houston, we'll continue diving into the top stories of the day. Stay with us for the second hour of Hello Houston.
With Ernie Manous, Celestia Sherman, and Frank Billingsley.
For the latest in local news, subscribe to the Hello Houston daily newsletter at houstonpublicmedia.org. Hello Houston is a production of Houston Public Media. The opinions expressed by the guests of this program are solely their own and do not represent the views of management, staff, or underwriters of Houston Public Media. This is News 88.7.
Support for Houston Public Media comes from listeners like you and from Houston Public Library Foundation, opening doors to discovery this summer through educational programs, books, and digital tools for everyone. More at houstonlibraryfoundation.org.
It's been a nice morning, but we could see more showers and thunderstorms this afternoon, mainly between 2 and 5, our high 90. It's 87. This is your NPR station, KUHF. Houston. News 88.7, a service of the University of Houston. It's 12 o'clock.
Just ahead on this hour of Hello Houston, we'll continue discussing the latest on the floods in Central Texas as search and rescue efforts continue for the 161 people known to be missing. I'm Frank Billingsley.
And I'm Celeste Diaz-Sherman. We'll also look at why a wave of high-profile anti-renewable energy bills died in the Texas House with Arcelia Martin, the Texas Renewables reporter for Inside Climate News.
And I'm Ernie Manous. Plus, Ashley Morgan-Olvera of the Texas Invasive Species Institute will educate us about what we've been seeing in the Houston area lately.
And we want to hear from you, so give us a call or send us a text at 713-440-8870 or email us at talk@hellohouston.org. You can also watch us on our YouTube channel. Just go to houstonpublicmedia.org and click the big orange banner.
Hello Houston is made possible in part by founding sponsors John Bradshaw and Kathy Sanders, and by gifts from listeners like you.
Live from NPR News, I'm Lakshmi Singh. Today, President Trump released a new batch of tariff letters. The documents shared on Truth Social assign new tariff rates to the Philippines, Brunei, Moldova, Algeria, Iraq, and Libya, set to go into effect August 1st. The U.S. buys relatively little from these countries. The biggest exporters that the U.S. has issued letters for so far are Japan and South Korea, and those came on Monday. Search operations are stretched for miles in the flood-ravaged Hill Country region of Texas. More than 160 people could still be missing from the 4th of July weekend flash floods. Local authorities are being peppered with questions about whether flood warnings could have been issued sooner. At a news conference today, Kirk County Sheriff Larry Latha promised transparency.
Those questions are going to be answered. I believe those questions need to be answered to the family of the missed loved ones, to the public, to the people that put me in this office. Those need to be, and I want that answer, and we're going to get that answer. And I know that's going to be asked over and over. Please understand that. We're not running. We're not going to hide from everything. That's going to be checked into.
More than 100 lives have been lost statewide. NPR Sergio Martinez Beltran brings us the story of one of the many flood survivors who've been sharing their accounts of what they did to stay alive.
The current of the Guadalupe River pushed Taylor Bergman and the woman he considers his mother into a tree.
I didn't think I would drown because I'm so tall, but I thought my mom was going to die in front of me.
They were trying to evacuate in the early morning, but they ran out of time. They clung to the tree for an hour. The mom's boyfriend and the family dog were swept by the strong current. It was pitch black. Bergman could not see anything. He could only hear the neighbors screaming for help. Fortunately, everyone was eventually accounted for. Bergman says he'll never live by the river again. Sergio Martinez Beltran, NPR News, Kerr County, Texas.
The Ukrainian Air Force says Russia launched another record number of drones at Ukraine, as well as missiles targeting the far western region near Poland. NPR's Joannika Kissis reports Russia has been stepping up airstrikes on Ukrainian cities in the last few months.
Ukraine's Air Force said Russia used nearly 730 Iranian-designed drones in the airstrikes. Most targeted Lutsk, a cobblestone city in western Ukraine known for its famous castle. City officials called it the most intense Russian attack on Lutsk since the beginning of the full-scale invasion. Ukraine's military says Russia is using 10 times more attack drones in airstrikes on Ukraine than it did last year. President Trump says his administration will send more defensive weapons to Ukraine, and Europe is drafting new sanctions on Russia. Joannika Kissis, NPR News, Kyiv.
From Washington, this is NPR News.
Live from News 88.7 in Houston, I'm Tom Perumian. The latest from the Texas Hill Country flood disaster is 119 are confirmed deceased. Officials in Kerr County tell us 59 adults are dead, 19 of them are unidentified. The bodies of 39 children have been recovered, 16 remain unidentified. Search efforts are continuing across the affected areas of the Guadalupe River and other waterways in the region. 161 people are missing. Dealing with grief and processing a tragic loss can be challenging. Mary Beth Lee is a licensed clinical social worker and therapist. She specializes in grief counseling at Houston's Well Mind Body Integrative Psychotherapy and Wellness. She says the aftermath of events like the deadly flash flood in Kerr County creates a ripple effect that extends past immediate family. She says many are currently experiencing a collective grief, and there are ways you can help those going through this tough time.
Just being there for the families and showing up. I mean, they're in such early stages of acute grief and still in shock. People in the close circle can help organize things like meals, and if you see them, it's just best to be present and let them talk. Sometimes they may need to repeat the story over and over again because you just can't even believe it's real.
Well Mind Body is offering free counseling sessions this month for those in need of emotional help. Texas flags are being lowered to half-staff today to honor the 119 people who have died in Central Texas after devastating flooding last week. In a statement, Governor Greg Abbott says thousands of first responders are still working on the ground. Flags will remain at half-staff until Monday, July 14th. Your check of weather, partly sunny with showers and thunderstorms later today, high of 91, a heat index of 102. Right now, partly cloudy, 87 degrees on the UH campus. I'm Tom Perumian, News 88.7.
Support for NPR comes from Subaru. The new Forester Hybrid offers symmetrical all-wheel drive and up to 581 miles per tank. Part of the new Forester Hybrid family of SUVs. More at Subaru.com/Forester Hybrid. This is NPR.
Just ahead on this hour.
Live from Houston Public Media and News 88.7, it's Hello Houston, an open forum on today's biggest stories affecting Houston and beyond. Call now, 713-440-8870, or let us know your thoughts on today's topics by emailing us at talk@hellohouston.org. And now here's your host for Hello Houston, Ernie Manous, Celestia Sherman, and Frank Billingsley.
Welcome back to the second hour of Hello Houston. It is Wednesday, July 9th.
Wow.
And our whole crew, the gang is back together.
All three of us. We're living up to our billing of all our Frank Billingsley.
There you go.
Of all three of us here on the show together.
I missed you guys. I was here on Monday. It was a very somber Monday.
Yeah, I watched you on YouTube, as people can and do.
Thank you, Frank.
Yeah. I saw you and Doug.
Yes, and Doug, it's just been really interesting to hear sitting next to veteran journalists all the different ways this is affecting people, and it's just one of those things where I think we continue to see these death tolls going up. We understand the missing number of people also continues to go up. So this has been a really just tough holiday weekend to come out of. Tragic.
And I think for myself, for a lot of our listeners, it was sad not to have you here with us during a weather tragedy. You had something you had to do. You were out of the country. Yep. You were dealing with stuff. You got back to us as soon as you could. And it's good to have you back. But already, just being with you today, we've already started to see what we were missing not having you report on this particular event, because you have such an insight into it and new things you were even telling us about today, which really kind of helped us better understand this whole situation. Before you start, though, I just want to remind people, if you have questions for Frank about this, please call in right now. Our phone lines are open, and you'll take these calls, 713-440-8870.
And I do want to say we've almost been waiting for this moment, because we did have some of our listeners and viewers say we'd be curious and interested to see what Frank has to say. And so, again, I want to reiterate what Ernie said, 713-440-8870. Now is the time where we'll have the space to talk about it.
Yep, no dumb questions, just dumb answers, right?
Right.
That's what I always say. So I was talking to you guys earlier because you're journalists, and the key, especially in any impending tragedy, is communication. Mm-hmm. And there's been a lot of talk about, well, did the cell phones work? Were there warnings? Were there sirens? It was the middle of the night. It was the holiday. The communication failed at some point. And so I've been watching this from Mexico. And I heard one report that we were getting 3 inches of rain per hour out of this storm. And I thought to myself, that's Tropical Storm Allison. That's what we had with Tropical Storm Allison, 3 inches of rain per hour. That's what we have with Tropical Storm Imelda, 3 inches per hour. Harvey was 6 inches per hour. To get that kind of storm system, where did this come from? And I think it pretty clearly came from the remnants of Barry. Now, if you remember, you and I were talking about Barry on the Monday on June 30th.
That's right.
And the last advisory had been put out by the National Hurricane Center. I put the link on our YouTube page, and I'm not going to read the whole thing, but it says basically the low-level circulation with Barry has gone, it's dissipated. So this is going to be the last National Hurricane Center advisory on Barry because it went into Tampico, Mexico. It's done, except the second paragraph says,
interesting.
Although the associated deep convection has decreased, there are still some small clusters of heavy rain. In fact, radar images show a mesoscale convective vortex, which means a spinning low, over eastern Mexico associated with this mid-level circulation. This will likely continue to produce heavy rainfall over portions of northeast Mexico throughout the day, potentially causing flooding and mudslides. Now, a lot of times, and usually, when these systems move into Mexico, the National Hurricane Center, especially when they've dissipated, they let go of it. And then they're focusing on Chantal, which they had all the way through the Carolinas and Virginia. So I watched some of the weather guys in the Hill Country, and they referred to what was left of Barry as a remnant low. Well, what does that mean to you? A remnant low. Not much. It doesn't sound very powerful. So this remnant low that was Barry is pulling in Gulf moisture and pulling in what Flossie's Pacific moisture was able to spin in.
Let me hold you right here for a second. For us, when you say remnant low, it means nothing.
I know.
To you,
to me,
what does it say?
It means it's what's left of a tropical storm.
And is that something you're concerned with?
Yes, because they can do crazy things, and they can become what we know as inland tropical storms. Back to Allison. Hurricane Allison, or Tropical Storm Allison, came in and pretty much died, except enough circulation to pull in Gulf moisture and drop 36 to 42 inches of rain. Imelda, the same thing. We couldn't find Imelda. Finally, there was a convergence. This was 2019. And Imelda dropped 41 inches of rain between Winnie and Beaumont. Harvey came in as a 130-mile-an-hour hurricane into Rockport and then basically died out as a 35 to 40-mile-an-hour tropical storm sitting over Victoria and dropped, as we know, 50 to 60 inches of rain. And so when I hear 3 inches of rain and we just had a tropical storm hit Mexico, that tells me right there this remnant low. And one weather person was saying, look, this is a remnant low, and I have two models. One shows 15 inches of rain, the other shows 3. And with the remnant low, I'm inclined to go with the lesser of those two. I would be inclined to go with more than those two, simply because I know what tropical systems can do. And there's been a lot of institutional knowledge lost on this because of all of the cuts. And I'm not blaming the cuts. I'm just saying that some of the top people that have dealt with inland tropical storms were not there. So my point being, if this storm, reinvigorating as it did, were renamed Barry, ex-tropical storm Barry, post-tropical storm Barry, or just tropical storm Barry, I think that naming a storm would have brought much more concern and attention to what really was going on here. That's why the Weather Channel names winter storms. They want them to have a name. And when we think about Harvey, we say Harvey. It had a name.
Okay.
Names get attention.
But Frank, my question though, I'm not used to hearing a tropical storm in the middle of Texas.
But it wasn't. It started in Mexico. and it drifted toward Texas, and it remained strong enough because of this pull of moisture from the Gulf and this pull of moisture from the Pacific, because Flossie was over in the Pacific pushing in moisture.
So what should have been essentially what a normal summer little storm passing through ended up being much stronger, obviously. And you're saying it was the remnants of that coming out of Mexico. And if it had a different name, then perhaps...
If it had a name.
If it even had a name, then perhaps it would give more urgency.
Correct.
Yeah.
Who
Absolutely.
would have named it? Whose responsibility?
The National Hurricane Center.
Something that you mentioned when we were talking earlier about this is you said if parents saw, hurricane...
Tropical storm,
or not a hurricane, excuse me, a storm, tropical storm or central storm or whatever it might be. You hear the word storm, people would be saying, is my child okay? I'm seeing that there's some weather going that way that has an actual name. So you're linking a name to a sense of urgency.
I think it always does.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's why we use these names. They didn't used to have names. It later became known as the Great Storm of 1900, but it didn't have a name before it got there, right?
Yeah.
And the Storm of 1915 and so on. And then they started to name these storms to give them an identity and to sort of focus in on what was going on. And I'm not blaming the National Hurricane Center. They did what they do. But it's kind of a shame that these remnants continued. And the meteorologists all understood what this was. It was a remnant low. It's something we deal with a lot. But a remnant low and these inland storms can be very powerful because for all intents and purposes, Tropical Storm Allison was pretty much gone after it went through Pearland, and then it came back and it brought rain to Sugarland. And then 2 days later, it was still there and reinvigorated and brought 36 to 42 inches of rain to Houston. So these storms, once they have this sort of potential and have a lot of moisture with them, you just can't let them go.
Mm-hmm. You are listening to Hello Houston. Frank Billingsley is sharing with us his views on the storms that happened over Independence Day here in Texas. And we're interested in what you think. Taking your calls and questions at 713-440-8870. Now that we have Frank back in the hot seat to give us some real educated and thoughtful discourse on all of this. Dennis from Uptown is on the line. Or is it Denise from Uptown on the line?
Hi, it's Denise.
Hello, Denise.
Hello, everyone. Hope you're
Denise.
having a good day. Hey, so Frank, I have a question for you. I'm already hearing a lot of meteorology is a science, right?
Correct.
I'm already hearing a lot of people talk about, it's an act of God, or it's just one of those things. But I got one of those reminders that popped up on my phone, and it was from last year on July 8th. I think we were in a major storm. All of Houston was red. Those things were forecasted. So how do you bridge this gap when you know that there are people who don't really listen to meteorologists or think, it's just the way it goes, the ebb and flow, when we do have science to help us with these things?
Well, it can be all of those. It could be an act of God, and it could be one of those things, and it can be a meteorological event.
Well, one of the words that I keep hearing people say, to Denise's point, is it was a fluke.
It wasn't a fluke. Tropical storms aren't flukes. They happen every summer and into the fall.
But that the amount of flooding that happened, that it was 3 stories high, that was a fluke.
Well, it was certainly capable. It was a terrible, horrible coincidence. It was a coincidence that Barry moved into Mexico and was able to draw in moisture from Flossie in the Pacific, which made it that much stronger. But when you have this system anywhere, it's not a fluke. I always say, and I predicted this with Harvey, because I learned this rule of thumb a long time ago. You take how fast the storm is moving, divide that number into 100, and that's how many inches of rain it could produce. So if it's moving 5 miles an hour, 20 inches of rain. 10 miles an hour, 10 inches of rain. 20 miles an hour, 5 inches of rain. Harvey, and I went on TV and said, it could move 2 miles an hour and produce 50 inches of rain, because 100 divided by 2 is 50. And I was right. And if you look at this system, it moved about 5 miles an hour and produced 20 inches of rain. So you start to look at the system differently when it has a name and it's known as a real tropically sourced. So it was a fluke that it pulled in all that moisture. It was a fluke that it rained that much over a river. And it was a fluke that it rained over a river that is known to flood. So, yeah, there were flukes. There were horrible coincidences involved. But it wasn't a fluke that it was there. It just was, I think, not.
That to me is, I think, the key point, that there's a disconnect, and I don't know if that's the right word, in a higher level of the way we are communicating senses of these natural disasters that are starting to recur more often.
Well, mass communication is our majors and the key. How do you communicate to the masses? You brand it.
Yep.
Kleenex is a tissue, but everyone calls it a Kleenex. And it's the same idea. We have an Imelda, a Harvey, an Allison, a Chantal that just went through the Carolinas. You brand these things. They tried to brand Uri, Winter Storm Uri, never really caught on in Houston, but it was branded as that. But these, the idea that it was just a fluke it was not just a fluke.
Well, I do want to point out, too, when we refer to something as a perfect storm, it's not that it's a great storm, it's a perfect storm because all the elements come together at this moment. This was a perfect moment for that. I'm just curious, and then I want to get back to some phone calls at 713-440-8870. I know you are not employed as a meteorologist today, but it is something that you take an interest in. So following all of this, how early on did you have a sense this could develop into something very serious?
No, I'm not going to lie. I mean, there was rains coming in, and it was sort of characterized as, well, remember we flipped the script on the July 4th was going to be a dry day. And then suddenly Wednesday, it was maybe not so dry.
Yep.
Maybe not so dry. And then, the hill country, that's not my territory.
Right.
It was clear that rain was coming there, and it started to become an issue mainly for the holiday. But when the first flash flood watches started to come out, it was pretty clear there was going to be a problem.
Which tomorrow we will have somebody from the
Jim Spencer is a friend of mine. I talked to him today. He's out of the country, but he has a phone call connection, and he was actually from Panama. He worked for KXAN, the NBC,
right,
in Austin. He was actually giving information to those folks there, 1,000 miles away, to try to give them his insight. And that's the thing we've lost with these cuts, is institutional knowledge. Those April retirements, and I know that they said there was plenty of staff to go around, but that knowledge of here's what we have, here's how we communicate it, here's how we warn for it, it's almost something you learn. And unfortunately, you learn it by doing it, like anything else.
713-440-8870. We're chatting with Frank about the storms. Let's go back to the phones. Greg from Kingwood is on the line. Greg, what's up?
Hi, guys. Hey, Frank, I agree with you, branded. But let's not call them retirements. Let's call them forced purges by this administration, right down to Abbott. Instead of putting all the money on the border, let's put it, in Ukraine. They have fire. They have alarm. They have sirens that go off. Doesn't mean that the Russian drone is going to hit you necessarily, but it does mean it's time to pay attention. And we should have, I've been here 12 years, and I've gone through 8 100-year or 500-year flood of rain events in Texas. I think there's something wrong with that terminology, but this is a direct result of the DOGE cuts, and it's going to happen with air traffic controllers. It's going to happen. You don't do it this way without the repercussions, and the repercussions are just beginning.
Well, I'm not going to argue with that. And Jim Spencer will be here tomorrow to talk about this, because he's really, the National Weather Service is doing the best they can.
Well, I think when we look at the timelines from the reporting that we are getting, the National Weather Service did what they were supposed to do in that area. What we do understand is there was a 22% openings of positions there here at the Houston, Galveston, North National Weather Service. We had about 44%, but they did just recently name a pivotal role.
Well, emergency meteorology coordination and the meteorologists, that position was open there. The meteorologist in charge, Jim will bring a lot more insight
We'll
into
be
that
able
office,
to really
'cause that's
get
who we
into
work
that.
with the whole time. I'm not here to play the blame game. I'm just here to say
No,
it's
absolutely.
a shame that
Right.
this didn't have a name. And even some of our comments says the psychology is like naming a farm animal that you got to slaughter. You don't name it. It becomes too personal. So a storm name does become personal. It's like this storm is coming for me. Someone also said that a big rain event mentions often ignore the record. I don't ignore Claudette. I've been to where Claudette in Dickinson County, down at the safari jungle place down in Dickinson, they have that marked where they had 47 inches of rain in 24 hours.
Now, something that you mentioned was mass communication, right? And naming it. Now, we understand that multiple warnings came through on phones. Do you think that even with a name and perhaps maybe there...
Maybe. I mean, first of all, there's so many alerts. Elderly
And
missing,
because
Amber Alerts, flood alerts.
And it also, there's a difference between an alert, a flash flood. There's different names that I wouldn't even know. Now I'm like, okay, what's the difference between a flash flood, a flash warning, an alert?
And was there a river flood warning? Does that even really put out
affect
there?
me if I'm, in a
And
cabin?
it's the middle of the night, and is your cell phone working?
I
And-
turn off my alerts.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So a NOAA weather radio, which a lot of people just don't have anymore because they count on their phones.
That is something that we have seen come up multiple times, is a radio that should be in these cabins.
Well, and there should also be just good old-fashioned communication, and you have
Good old-fashioned like the phone. 713-440-8870. Let's go over to Anastasia from Northwest Houston. Anastasia, what's on your mind?
Hi, so I was actually driving through that storm in Kerrville, driving on my way to El Paso when it was happening. So I was outside of San Antonio going to Comfort, and I got 4 alerts on my phone, but I was in the Kerrville area when it happened, and I've never received anything like that. So I was curious, should I have received that alert maybe a little bit earlier? And since I was driving on I-10, maybe that alert saying, hey, if you're traveling on I-10, either pull over or do something else, because I had no idea what to do. All I was told is there's a flash flood emergency. It's an extremely dangerous and life-threatening situation. Do not attempt to travel. But I was traveling, so I had no idea what to do.
Anastasia, we're glad you're safe. Thank you for calling in. Frank,
It's
what are your thoughts?
It's not perfect. It's not going to be perfect because, first of all, the timing on when these are issued and when you get them, and I just can't speak to everyone's cell phone and how often. I don't even know how these alerts are put out to a cell phone, to be honest. I mean, I know if the National Weather Service writes one. I used to put out alerts because we would crawl them, on the TV screen, and that's how we did it. Or we would go live on TV and say, here's what we've got. How other communication sources do it, I'm not familiar, but certainly we need to rethink it. But look, let's face it, we have a flood watch in Houston. What do? You don't do anything. We have a flood warning. You're probably like, well, my house, I look outside, I'm fine. I'm good. And then you were even telling me, 2.5-3 weeks ago, you were caught at Fountain View in Richmond for an hour.
I got caught out, and this is the second time that this has happened to me.
That's the problem. Until you are caught in the flood, you probably don't even know what's going to happen.
You're absolutely right. And I was shocked. I have to tell you, I was really just shocked. And this was just on my way home. And it's on my Instagram account. I was like, oh my goodness, this is.
I got caught in one. I was going down Richmond to
terrible.
Montrose to pick up our dog. Our puppy's going through some rehabilitation issues. And sure enough, everything stopped. And fortunately, I kind of know which roads work and which don't. So I was able to get around it. But a lot of people were stuck.
Well, you also forget, too, we think flooding and we think rising water. You don't think about the power of moving water that we saw in those videos. That is just...
And 2 inches of water will knock a human off their feet, and 6 inches will move a car. Yeah. And this was 30 feet, and that's what moved a house.
Let's grab another call real quickly from David from Montgomery. David, what's on your mind?
Well, everybody keeps talking about the communications and getting the cell phone messages. I've spent 30 years camping out in that area, and part of the reason I go is there is no cell phone coverage.
Well, that's a point.
Down on those rivers.
Yep.
That's like the old golf course reason to go play was you didn't have to mess with your cell phone. You have a very good point.
That's a great point.
Yeah, a lot of people probably didn't want a cell phone to bother them.
Unplugging.
Yeah. David, thank you for that. And let's grab Charlie from the Woodlands. Charlie, what's on your mind?
Well, I guess there's three things. The first thing is there was a bill in the House and Senate in the Texas legislature before this happened, and Dan Patrick tabled it for emergency or warnings like this. And it kind of is a good indication of what the one party thinks about climate warming. And I go to Hawaii every year, and in Maui, they have alarm systems like the civil alert systems if there was a potential tidal wave that's going to hit. So it's something that's really done everywhere. I think there's a lack of urgency from one political party. I'll put it nicely.
Well, thanks for the comment. To my original point, I think that the sense of urgency would have been stronger if this had been a named storm. If someone had said, this is what's left of Tropical Storm Barry, and it's increasingly dangerous, and we have to watch out for Barry. I think that would have gotten more focus. But I'm playing Monday morning quarterback here.
Do you think this will change the way people look at these?
If you've been through it, it will.
I think so.
like
in
the
Texas,
institution of meteorology.
We were going through.
Folks will look at it differently now.
Hopefully, that's how institutional knowledge happens. You go through it and you say, "Hey, I remember when this happened in the Hill Country 10 years ago. This is a similar situation."
And I just want to clarify, we keep talking about this bill. It was House Bill 13, which would have established a grant program for counties to build new emergency communication infrastructure. We have talked about this bill. We've heard it, but I wanted to make sure people understood it was House Bill 13. If you wanted to look it up.
Yep.
We also know that Governor Abbott has said he's going to be calling special sessions, and this specific type of grant program and emergency communication is going to be on.
Well, Jim Spencer will have a lot to say about that also on tomorrow's show. We'll talk about. Thank you for letting me vent on this. I just think that this is part of it. We have to learn to communicate better and better.
That's right. Coming up on Hello Houston, the Texas Renewables reporter for Inside Climate News, Arcelia Martin, will join us to discuss why a wave of high-profile anti-renewable energy bills died in the Texas House. This is News 88.7.
Donald Trump uses this kind of conspiracy theory to provide energy, almost rocket fuel for his own movement. And when it no longer suits his purposes, he's willing to move on.
I'm Michael Barbaro. That's Today on the Daily from the New York Times.
You can hear The Daily. It's coming up tonight at 7 o'clock.
Houston Public Media, in partnership with Texas Southern University, brings to you The Vibe. R&B, hip-hop, and neo-soul. Music that resonates with all ages. The Vibe on 88.7 HD3 and on the Houston Public Media app.
Your right to know what's really going on in our world depends on more than just great journalism. It depends on your participation.
Houston Public Media is funded by Houstonians for Houstonians. 80% of our budget comes directly from you, our community.
That's how trusted information stays free and accessible. No ads, no shareholders, just clear and careful reporting.
Protect your right to stay informed by visiting houstonpublicmedia.org/donate or call 888-909-0887.
Support comes from the Eternal Gandhi Museum, Houston, highlighting the power of nonviolent conflict resolution through examples of peace leaders worldwide. Now open. Field trips and group visits available. More at egmh.org.
Support comes from Baylor College of Medicine, creating tomorrow's medicine today. Known for their medical research and innovation, Baylor pushes boundaries through health discoveries and their pursuit to improve the health of humankind.
Support comes from Broadway at the Hobby Center, presenting the American musical Parade. In this real-life story, Leo Frank faces a test of faith, humanity, justice, and devotion. On stage July 15th through 20th. More at BroadwayAtTheHobbyCenter.com.
And now back to Hello Houston. Call 713-440-8870 or email us at talk@hellohouston.org to get your comment in on today's topics. Now back to Ernie Manous, Celeste Diaz-Sherman, and Frank Billingsley.
In the last session of the Texas legislature, a wave of high-profile anti-renewable energy bills aimed at slowing the growth of wind and solar power either collapsed in committee or died in the House. These measures would have required costly backup generation mandates, restricting permitting, and even tied renewable expansion directly to natural gas capacity. But strong opposition from broad coalition, including energy developers, manufacturers, the oil and gas sector, and major employees, ultimately thwarted the efforts. Critics warn the bills risked higher energy rates, grid instability, and could discourage billions in clean energy investment. Why did these anti-renewable proposals fall flat? And what does it signal about Texas's future energy trajectory? A complicated word for me. Joining us now is Arcelia Martin, who is the Texas Renewable reporter from Inside Climate News. Arcelia, welcome to Hello Houston. Trajectory. There, I got the word right. There we go. If you have questions about this topic, please give us a call at 713-440-8870.
You know, Arcelia, why don't you just talk to us a little bit to explain and some of examples of renewable energies that is used here in the state of Texas?
So we have the most wind energy of any state here in Texas. We also have a growing amount of solar. And then ERCOT has talked about how battery storage being onto the grid has really helped in terms of some of these peak demand that we're seeing in summer heat. So we have a mix of those. We also have hydro, we have nuclear. So we have a pretty wide swath there.
So what was your biggest disappointment from the Texas legislature for something that was not passed that you wanted to be passed?
Well, it's not really, my ground to say whether something should be passed or not passed as a journalist, but more so it was really interesting to see which groups were participating in opposition of some of these bills, particularly the oil and gas lobby, who typically don't, speak on bills that target renewable energy. But I think it was really interesting to see kind of this collaboration among all these different lobby groups to end these bills and not let them get through the legislature.
Which I find really interesting because when we look at renewables, a lot of time it is more traditional oil and gas companies that have all of the technology, they have the resources, they have the infrastructure, the tools, and the knowledge by these engineers to be able to execute on some of these newer type things. So talk to us a little bit about that dynamic, because it seems like if these weren't passed, then how are they working for or against each other internally, if that makes sense?
Sure. I mean, I think that, there was so the bill that saw participation from both the renewable industry and the oil and gas industry was a pair of companion bills. It was House Bill 3356 and SB 715. And that was really interesting because at the end of the day, they're really interested in how are we adding the most capacity to the grid, both parties. How are we adding more capacity to the grid? And also, how are we going to keep costs down as we're trying to put more energy out there, as we're having more energy users come onto the grid? So think about data centers, for example. So it was really interesting to hear oil and gas in an oil and gas rich state say, hey, these measures aren't actually going to help us or consumers, because the Oil and Gas Association, Texas Oil and Gas, they have some of their members buy renewable energy in order to power their operations. And so they didn't want to see their costs go up either.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. There was one piece of legislature I noticed that got through, and that has to do with people launching balloons like at a vigil, because those balloons can end up hurting the wildlife. The birds see them as worms, or they choke on them. The balloons fall down from the sky. I know it's kind of crazy, but do you have any familiarity with that bill? I mean, who was so intent on stopping balloon launches?
I think you're going to have to ask someone else about that bill. Unfortunately, I don't know.
Yeah, it was one of the few that actually passed.
It's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I get it. It can be dangerous to birds, and they get tangled up in all of the ribbons, and they get tangled up in all of the balloons that fall from the sky, and they try to eat them, and they die from that. So it is a wildlife issue, and somebody must have said, look, let's stop with the balloon launches. But it's about the only thing that passed. Everything else failed.
You mentioned that Texas is one of the largest states that has wind farms, and we do see, anytime you're driving in the state of Texas, you do see a lot of that. And I think a lot of that has to do with the amount of space that we have. And so when we look at, wind and solar, how did wind capacities and organizations in Texas do this state legislation?
I mean, I think that they were under a lot of stress and concern because as of right now, wind is our largest renewable energy type, but the capacity additions, so basically new wind plants, are going down because, like you said, they take up a lot of space. It's kind of a harder project to get up in comparison to solar, which is like a little easier, is my understanding. But I think the bill that caused them the most concern was SB 819. And it sparked a really interesting debate between, the environmentalists and the conservationists, but then also between conservatives, because, there were conservatives who were bringing up, hey, if I want to lease my land and to a wind farm, I should be allowed to, because that's the ideal of property rights, right? So why are you trying to tell me that I shouldn't be allowed to do that or get in my way of doing that? And so to me, that was one of the most fascinating conversations to come out of the legislature around renewable energy, was basically, where does property rights stand on the conservative ideal among lawmakers in Texas, and how has that shifted over time?
Yeah, we talked about that, and we had a caller say, "Hey, that's my retirement." Is that
leasing?
Yeah. So looking at what happened in the legislative session and looking forward, how do you see Texas progressing in this, and who are we 20 years from now, 30 years from now, looking at the way, no pun intended, the winds are blowing?
I think that we're still a leader of energy across all fuel types. And I think given the business environment of Texas, it makes sense that will continue. I'm interested to see how the removal or the phasing out of the clean energy tax credits from the big, beautiful bill will play out in Texas. It is important to note that there were bills in the state legislature that were aimed at, curtailing renewable expansion that didn't pass in Texas, but they did pass on the federal level. And I think that's not something we've seen before. So, back to your question, where Texas will be in the future. I mean, I'm not sure that I'm not exactly, there's different groups that have estimates about how these tax credits will cut jobs, how it will cut our energy expansion and our independence in Texas. And so we'll see how that turns out in a few years.
Well, what's interesting to me too is that the big beautiful bill that you mentioned, it cuts out the EV credit of $7,500. A lot of people don't know Texas used to have an EV credit of $2,500.
A lot of states, yeah.
Yeah,
right.
And that was cut out in 2023, but that probably wasn't even brought up this session, was it? I don't recall it being brought up. Like, let's reinstate it.
It wasn't one of the main conversations, I think. In the renewable energy world. I think that the kind of four bills that, there's four bills essentially that they were the main talking points.
What bills were those? And can you give us a little, touch base on those four?
Totally. Yeah. So the first one was SB 388, which would have required every new watt of solar generation be accompanied by a new watt of natural gas. Then there was the companion measure bills that we spoke about. So 3356 and SB 715, so many letters. That would have required that existing wind and solar farms have to get fossil fuel-based power or battery storage connected for the hours they're not operating. And that's the one that the Texas Oil and Gas Association voiced their opposition for. And then lastly was SB 819, which would have required that wind and solar have permitting from the Public Utility Commission that no other energy type has. So those are the 4 bills that I think really caught everyone's attention in the industry, and also in the greater kind of environmental lens.
Well, and it's another 2 years before any of that has a chance to come back, I guess. Do you think any of it will relive in the special session?
That's a good question.
I don't think so in the special session, but I mean, I think that's a great point to bring up is that, you know, these sessions happen every 2 years, and a lot of the bills that we saw this session were recycled bills from the past session. So I think that, you know, if these are issues that the sponsors of these bills feel really strongly about, despite their opposition from party members and from the business lobby, whether it be renewable or gas, they might introduce it again in the next session. We'll see.
We'll see.
Arcelia Martin is the Texas Renewables reporter for Inside Climate News. Arcelia, thanks for joining us.
Thank you all so much.
Coming up, we'll discuss our state's invasive species. Stay with us as Hello Houston continues.
It's one thing to love public radio, but it's a special thing to support it. Consider this. If you've got a car you don't need anymore, or you've got one that's simply too expensive to repair, you can arrange to donate it to Houston Public Media. We take any kind of vehicle in any condition. It's easy for you, pickup is free, and it could be worth hundreds of dollars in support. Visit HoustonPublicMedia.org/cars to learn more. And thanks.
I'm Josh Adams, the new general manager of Houston Public Media, and we are here for one reason, you. I'm thrilled to lead this remarkable team dedicated to our mission of informing, educating, and inspiring everyone in the greater Houston area. And yes, these are challenging times, but together we'll meet them head on with bold ideas, honest reporting, and stories that matter. Houston Public Media is your public media. Together, let's make it incredible.
Support comes from GiveMeTheVIN.com. Purchasing vehicles in minutes with the VIN or license plate, or by bringing the vehicle to Houston area offices. Details at GiveMeTheVIN.com.
Support comes from Holocaust Museum Houston, featuring Unveiled from the Vault, showcasing never-before-seen artifacts from the museum's collection. Viewing begins with opening reception on July 24th. Details at hmh.org.
Support comes from GenPro, a Houston-based home generator service providing power to homes during unexpected outages, helping with connectivity and productivity. More information is available at genpro.com. Support for Houston Public Media comes from attorney mediator Ron Bankston, providing in-person, video conferencing, and hybrid mediation and arbitration services. More information is available at ronbankston.com.
And now back to Hello Houston. To comment on any of today's topics, call 713-440-8870 or email us at talk@hellohouston.org. And now here's Ernie Manous, Celestia Sherman, and Frank Billingsley.
Okay, first things first. We have a number of
it looks bad outside.
Strong storms coming through.
Gosh.
Yeah, and we're getting what they call strong storm warnings. They're not necessarily severe thunderstorms, but they are strong thunderstorms that can produce a lot of rain. They're moving northeast at 20 miles an hour, pushing across really everywhere you look across our area right now. So nobody's getting away with that. You may be dry right now, but I don't think you're going to stay dry.
So stay safe.
Stay safe. Don't get out in it if you can't. It's more than anything. People sometimes slow down, but then the rain can be so heavy you don't see what's in front of you, and that's the problem.
I was going to go out and grab
champ
something
burger
for lunch. Yeah, and I was going to maybe even sit outside and eat it.
It may go from champ burger to damp burger pretty quick, so watch out.
All right, that was a good one. I'll give you that.
I had something eating
dad joke.
Granddad jokes in my case. I'm not on Medicare. I'm on MetaWare. MetaWare in my glasses. All right. Every once in a while, we receive news that an invasive species has been spotted in the Houston area, like dad jokes. Plants, animals, significant threats to local ecosystems that reduce biodiversity. They outperform the native species. That happened with squirrels. I don't know if you've ever seen black squirrels in New York City.
There's also the
gray squirrel,
albino squirrel.
Yeah, and there are red squirrels, especially Michigan. But the gray squirrel is the alpha squirrel. It's kind of taken over. So but other in Houston recently that we've seen hammerhead flatworms. I've seen a lot of these little round worms everywhere. Asian needle ants. I think I was attacked by some in a swimming pool, but I'm going to ask. And monk parakeets. So to tell us more and answer our questions about the Houston area is Ashley Morgan-Olvera, Director of Research and Education at the Texas Invasive Species Institute. I guess that's TISI, like TC fly almost. Ashley, welcome to Hello Houston.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, I like to call us TISI. It's a lot easier than saying the whole acronym altogether.
Yeah, thank you for laughing at my dad jokes, by the way.
So if you're not watching,
a good dad joke.
I was in a swimming
people aren't
pool.
watching on YouTube. They missed Frank's little stand-up routine, and our guest really enjoying Frank because I guess you're new to him. Yeah. Celeste and I, it's old hat.
So I was in a swimming pool on the west end of Galveston a couple weeks ago, and these little ant-like things just kept biting.
I got bit by a jellyfish over the weekend in Galveston.
Oh no! So tell us about what's eating us alive.
What isn't eating us alive right now, right? So there's a lot of new insects that are kind of popping up, and the Asian needle ant is getting some rumblings right now because it's one of those, it was inconspicuous to begin with. So we don't know if it's here in the state, but it's in neighboring states. And so it's one of those, it could easily be here. We just didn't know because it doesn't have, a plaque on its head that says, "Hi, I'm invasive. Please remove me." So what you encountered could have been needle ants, could have been fire ants. If they weren't red, then you might be onto something else. If they had a reddish hint to them, you'd probably know like fire ants will float on water.
No,
so
these look like regular ants.
Floods move them around versus drown them out.
Well, they hurt. I know that.
To just set the conversation too for folks who are a little confused, how exactly do you define invasive species and why does it matter? If they're in our area, aren't they here now?
That's a great question. I know a lot of people are like, why does it matter? Because some invasive species have been here for hundreds of years, like the tallow tree, feral hogs were brought over by conquistadors. Like there's certain battles we're not going to win. But I always like to start my workshops, any presentation with what is an invasive species, because when you have that understanding, it helps you delineate things, separate things out. So people will throw around weed, exotic, and invasive as if they're the same thing, and they're not. So many invasive species are exotic, but what lends them the term invasive is that they cause harm. So that harm could be that they harm our electrical work, they harm our health, right? They bite us, maybe we have allergic reactions, maybe they're destroying our forests, maybe they're clogging up our lakes, maybe, they're overrunning our backyards, they're creating monocultures or one type of plant, which then affects every other animal that lives there. If their type of tree isn't there anymore, they have to move on. So there's a lot of harm, and that's why certain species are called invasive and not everything. So you might have some plants that are just exotic because they come here and they mind their own business and they don't cause any harm. But then you have other plants
clarify your definition.
I'll tell you they're invasive, but you can go buy them at the landscape store.
Right. To clarify your definition then, an invasive species doesn't need to be something that came from even long ago from outside. They may actually be in this area, but they are they cause harm. Termites, I think of, they're going to eat things. Are they an invasive species by your definition?
No, they belong here. So
it
they're
has to
an
be something
important
that
decomposer in the environment, right? So you've also got some naturalized species. So oftentimes invasive species do come from the outside. That is often it. But people like to think American species, they don't cause any problem. Yes, they do in other countries, right? Everybody has their own problems with invasive species. And that's just from humans moving things around since Marco Polo went over to the Khan Empire, right? So we've been moving things around for millennia, and this is just a byproduct of it. And it's also like there wasn't a federal definition of invasive species until 1999. So we're only working with 26 years here of the federal government recognizing, yes, invasive species exist. So we're behind the ball on a lot of things.
So is it your mission?
People have been moving things over like honeybees and earthworms and things we like and some things we don't like.
Well, what about termites? Would that be considered an invasive species?
No, they're not invasive. So there are some invasive termites. Like Formosan termites, those are invasive because they're not native to here, so they compete with our termites that already exist here.
Well, so what is your group's mission? Are you out to identify the invasive species and then do what? Get rid of them? Warn farmers? Warn people? How do you work with all of this?
It's definitely an uphill battle. We really have a two-pronged approach. So we do a lot of survey work for new and emerging pests. So we have a lot of grants with the USDA and APHIS and all of these invasive species entities. So we are some of the boots on the ground trying to look for new invasives, but we also have a really big educational platform. So that's what our websites are about. We want everyone to just be able to Google, what's this weird black slug? And then usually our page pops up with, hi, it's an invasive slug. Please remove it from your property. So we're really about education, letting everybody know they exist, where they exist. And then also, I do a lot of workshops throughout the state. So it's really just getting everybody aware that invasives exist because a lot of people don't even know this is a problem.
And how to remove them? Do you include that part of it?
Yes, we definitely have a whole section on management.
Do invasive...
And some people will be like, so you mean kill it? It's like, yes, if it's a flatworm, I do want you to kill it.
Do invasive species ever become part of our ecosystem? Are they always going to be an outsider?
So, you've got some that, by this point in time, we know more or less, like there's been enough recorded history, right? Especially in like the botany, zoology world. We have enough history at this point where we can see if something is causing damage. So like I had touched on, like the earthworm, the European earthworm and the European honeybee, those are not native, but they have come here and the ecosystems have adapted to them, right? Now we're all saying, please don't take our honeybees away, right? They didn't overly outcompete any of the other species. Earthworms kind of doing the same thing. As long as they stay in a garden, you're not throwing them out in the forest where they don't belong. They serve a really good benefit. So, some people do say that about tallows. Well, tallows have been in the Houston area. They make up 90% of the canopy. Why remove them? Why bother? Mm-hmm. And it's because, yes, they have been here, but they have shifted the entire environment for their success. Their seeds can reduce frog populations, other plants can't survive, certain animals don't feed off of them that feed off of other plants. So it's one of those, just because it's been here a lot longer than you doesn't mean that we should just not care.
Hey,
right? We have to do something.
Are tiger shrimp on your radar? Because I know tiger shrimp were a big problem in the Gulf, coming in and eating our good old-fashioned little shrimp.
Yes.
Are they still a problem?
So they were. I remember that was really a big one when I first joined TISI about, what year is it? It's been 13 years now, and tiger shrimp was a very big concern. It is in the Gulf. It's still on our radar because it's still, I think that one's actually a prohibited species where you shouldn't be buying and selling it. But it is one of those, we want to keep an eye on it. We want people to know about it, but I don't think it overtook as much as they expected.
Good.
Okay, so I'm not a huge outdoorsy person, but I do like to be outdoors.
Gardening.
And so I'm
like your yard. I get that. Yeah.
Yes. Are there any invasive species here in Houston, whether it's a plant that is really poisonous, really stay away
that
from
hangs out in a garden?
Or anywhere that we should really be aware of?
So there would be a few. I would say some that are more of a larger concern from me. So my history is parasitology, so I study parasites, and there are a couple of invasive slugs and snails. One is a fully aquatic snail, so you're more likely to see this in like a ditch or by the bayous. But really, these black slugs or any of the invasive slugs on our list or any of those snails, they're known to transmit parasites. They're not supposed to infect us. Those parasites are looking for rats, but we're mammals, and so they try to infect us. And so it's one of those, you see these, please kill them. Please remove them. We don't need that added threat, right? I mean, we're not ones to like, oh, here's a slug, let me eat it.
Right. And
hearing
you talk about this, I just want to thank you for the work that you do.
Yes. I've got one quick question. It may be a longer answer, so give me a quick answer to it. Is this just not, in the broadest sense of the word, evolution? Is this not the evolving of our ecosystems if they're on this planet with us and they're shifting and moving, and they tend to take their hold where they can?
But how did they get here?
Little teeny planes.
Evolution is about evolving to the environment around you, or maybe you migrate, right? But who caused the migration of these organisms? Humans did. So I feel like it's humans. We have to correct the migration.
But aren't we a part of that
So we are the
plan?
most invasive
Bringing all that mulch
species.
from other countries. Bring that mulch from other countries. You bring their varmints with them.
I have so many more questions, and we're out of time.
Ashley Morgan-Olvera is the Director of Research and Education at the Texas Invasive Species Institute. Ashley, thank you so much for joining us today on Hello Houston.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
And that brings us to the end of our show. Get your questions ready for tomorrow. Former KXAN Austin meteorologist Jim Spencer will be joining us and taking your questions. Until then, thank you for listening to Hello Houston. We will be back tomorrow with more conversations. This is News 88.7.
Thanks for listening to Hello Houston. Join us every Monday through Friday from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. to talk all things Houston. The Hello Houston production team includes Garrett Bowman, William Menjivar, Jen Altide, Todd Holslander, and Jim Kovacic. For the latest in local news, subscribe to the Hello Houston daily newsletter at houstonpublicmedia.org. Hello Houston is a production of Houston Public Media. The opinions expressed by the guests of this program are solely their own and do not represent the views of management, staff, or underwriters of Houston Public Media. This is News 88.7.
Support comes from Moody Mansion, the restored 28,000 square foot mansion on Galveston's Broadway, furnished with original items and decor